This is Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll, Chapter 1, Looking Glass House. One thing was certain, that the white kitten had nothing to do with it. It was the black kitten's fault entirely, for the white kitten had been having its face washed by the old cat for the last quarter of an hour and bearing it pretty well, considering. So you see that it couldn't have had any hand in the mischief. The way Dinah washed her children's faces was this. Now, if you remember back to Alice in Wonderland, Dinah was Alice's cat, and she wished she could be with Dinah, or she wished Dinah had been with her. So it's interesting that Dinah is the first character, really, that shows up here. The way Dinah washed her children's faces was this. First, she held the poor thing down by its ear with one paw, and then, with the other paw, she rubbed its face all over it, the wrong way, beginning at the nose, and, just now, as I said, she was hard at work with the white kitten, which was lying quite still and trying to purr, no doubt feeling that it was all meant for its good. But the black kitten had been finished with it earlier in the afternoon, and so, while Alice was sitting curled up in a corner of the great armchair, half talking to herself and half asleep, the kitten had been having a grand game of romps with the ball of worsted that Alice had been trying to wind up, and had been rolling it up and down until it had all come undone again. And there it was, spread all over the hearth rug, in knots and tangles, with the kitten running after its own tail in the middle. Now, I didn't know what worsted was, so I wrote that down in my journal here. I wrote down the word worsted, and then I thought I would use context clues to try to figure it out. Whoops, you can't really see it there. Thought I would use context clues to try to figure it out. And so I figured out anyway that it was yarn. I'm just going to tell you that right now. There's just no sense waiting. And even if we go back and reread this, look, it says a ball of worsted, a grand game of romps with a ball of worsted that Alice had been trying to wind up. So if I replace yarn, it'll say that. With yarn that Alice had been trying to wind up. And it had been rolling it up again and down again until it had all come undone again. And there it was, spread all over the hearth rug, all knots and tangles, with the kitten running after its own tail in the middle. And then I looked it up. I just Googled it. Sure enough, worsted's a kind of yarn. I mean, who knew? How do I not get to know that? But until now. But I do, so that's kind of cool. All right. "Oh, you wicked little thing," cried Alice, catching up the kitten and giving it a little kiss to make it understand that it was in disgrace. "Really, Dinah ought to have taught you better manners. You ought, Dinah, you know you ought," she added, looking reproachfully at the old cat, and speaking in it as across a voice as she could manage. Then she scrambled back into the armchair, taking the kitten and the worsted with her. See, I can replace it for yarn there. Works great. And began winding up the ball again. But she didn't get on very fast, and she was talking all the time, sometimes to the kitten, sometimes to herself. Kitty sat very demurely on her knee, pretending to watch the progress of the winding, and now and then putting out one paw and gently touching the ball, as if it would be glad to help, if it might. "Do you know what tomorrow is, Kitty?" Alice began. "You'd have guessed if you'd have been up in the window with me, only Dinah was making you tidy, so you couldn't. I was watching the boys getting in sticks for the bonfire, and it wants plenty of sticks, Kitty. Oh, it got so cold and it snowed they had to leave off. Never mind, Kitty. We'll go and see the bonfire tomorrow." Here, Alice wound 2 or 3 turns of the worsted round the kitten's neck, just to see how it would look. She put the little yarn around the kitty's neck just to see how it would look. This led to a scramble in which the ball rolled down upon the floor, and yards of it got unwound again. Yeah, kitties like yarn. Or worsted, if you will. "Do you know, I was so angry, Kitty," Alice went on, as they were comfortably settled again. "When I saw all the mischief you had been doing, I was very nearly opening the window and putting you out in the snow. And you'd have deserved it, you little mischievous darling. What have you got to say for yourself? Now don't interrupt me," she went on, holding up one finger. "I'm going to tell you all your faults. Number 1, you squeaked twice while Dinah was washing your face this morning. Now you can't deny it, Kitty." "I heard you." "What's that you say?" Pretending that the kitten was speaking. "Her paw went into your eye? Well, that's your fault for keeping your eyes open. If you'd shut them up, it wouldn't have happened. Now, don't make any more excuses, but listen. Number 2, You pulled Snowdrop away by the tail just as I had put down the saucer of milk for her. What? You were thirsty, were you? How do you know she wasn't thirsty too? Now for number 3. You unwound every bit of the worsted while I wasn't looking. That's 3 faults, Kitty, and you've not been punished for any of them yet. You know, I've been saving up all your punishments for Wednesday week, I suppose. They have saved up all my punishments. Suppose they had saved up all my punishments, she went on, talking more to herself than the kitten. What would they do at the end of a year? I should be sent to prison, I suppose, when the day came, or, let me see, suppose each punishment was going to be going without a dinner. Then, when the miserable day came, I should have to go without 50 dinners at once. Well, I shouldn't mind that much. I'd far rather go without them than eat them. That's kind of a funny joke from a little girl, right? She doesn't have any choice what she's getting served for dinner. So, and she probably doesn't like it sometimes. Do you hear the snow against the window panes, Kitty? How nice and soft it sounds, just as if someone was kissing the window all over outside. I wonder if the snow loves the trees and the fields, that it kisses them so gently, and then it covers them up snug, you know, with a white quilt, and perhaps it says, "Go to sleep, darlings, till the summer comes again." And when they wake up in the summer, Kitty, they dress themselves all in green and dance about whenever the wind blows. Oh, that's very pretty, cried Alice, dropping the ball of worsted to clap her hands, and I do wish it was true. I'm sure the woods look sleepy in the autumn, when the leaves are getting brown. Kitty, can you play chess? Now don't smile, my dear, I'm asking seriously, because when we were playing just now, you watched just as if you understood it, and when I said check, you purred. Well, it was a nice check, Kitty. And I really thought I might, and really I might have won, if it hadn't been for that nasty knight that came wiggling down among my pieces. Kitty dear, let's pretend. And here, I wish I could tell you half the things Alice used to say, beginning with her favorite phrase, let's pretend. That's a great phrase. Kids use that phrase. I used that phrase a lot when I was little. Let's pretend. She had quite a long argument with her sister only the day before, all because Alice had begun with, let's pretend we're kings and queens, and her sister, who liked being very exact, had argued that they couldn't, because there were only 2 of them, and Alice had been reduced at last to say, well, you can be one of them, and then I'll be all the rest. And once she had really frightened her old nurse by shouting suddenly in her ear, Nurse, do let's pretend that I'm a hungry hyena and you're a bone. She's a funny kid. She has a great imagination. But this is taking us away from Alice's speech to the kitten. Let's pretend that you're the Red Queen, Kitty. Do you know, I think if you sat up and folded your arms, you'd look exactly like her. Now do try. There's a dear. And Alice got the Red Queen off the table and set it up before the kitty as a model for it to imitate. However, the thing didn't succeed. Principally, Alice said, because the kitten wouldn't fold its arms properly. So to punish it, she held it up to the looking-glass, that it might see how sulky it was. And if you're not good directly, she added, I'll put you through into that looking-glass house. How would you like that? Now, if you'll only attend, Kitty, and not talk so much, I'll tell you all my ideas about the looking-glass house. First, there's a room you can see through the glass. That's just the same as our drawing room, only things go the other way. I can see all of it when I get up on a chair. All the bit behind the fireplace. Oh, I do wish I could see that bit. I want so much to know whether they've a fire in the winter. You never can tell. You know, unless our fire smokes, and then smoke comes up in that room too. But that may be only pretense, just to make it look as if they had a fire. Well then, the books are something like our books, only the words go the wrong way. I know that because I've held up one of our books to the glass, and then they hold up one in the other room. So she's already getting her imagination started. She has such a big imagination. So when she says through the looking glass, I'm actually going to write down looking glass. A lot of times the term looking glass is used to refer to something that, like another world or another universe or something, that's through the looking glass. It mirrors the universe or the world that we have here, but it's different. You know, they've got their own stuff going on. So in this one, she's saying there's a room, there's a house, a looking glass house, so that mirrors kind of what their house looks like, or does it, you know? It's a kind of a deep thinking for a child, but she's very imaginative in that way, so it's not surprising. But that's what looking glass kind of means in this context. All right. So, how would you like to live in the looking glass house, Kitty? I wonder if they'd give you milk there. Perhaps looking glass milk isn't good to drink. But oh, Kitty, now we come to the passage. You can just see a little peep of the passage in the looking glass house if you leave the door of our drawing room wide open. And it's very like our passage as far as you can see. Only know it may be quite different on beyond. Oh, Kitty, how nice it would be if we could only get through the looking glass house. I'm sure it's got, such beautiful things in it. Let's pretend there's a way of getting through into it somehow, Kitty. Let's pretend the glass has got all soft like gauze so that we can get through. Why, it's turning into a sort of mist now, I declare. It'll be easy to get through. She was up on the chimney piece while she said this, though she hardly knew how she had got there, and certainly the glass was beginning to melt away, just like a bright silvery mist. In another moment, Alice was through the glass, and she had jumped lightly down into the looking-glass room. The first thing she did was to look whether there was a fire in the fireplace, and she was quite pleased to find out there was a real one, blazing as brightly as the one she had left behind. So I shall be as warm here as I was in the old room, thought Alice. Warmer, in fact, because there will be no one here to scold me from the fire. Oh, what fun it'll be when they see me through the looking-glass and can't get at me. Then she began to look about and noticed that what could be seen from the old room was quite common and uninteresting, but that all the rest was as different as possible. For instance, the pictures on the wall next to the fire seemed to be all alive, and the very clock on the chimney-piece, you can only see the back of it in the looking-glass, had got the face of a little old man and grinned at her. They don't keep this room so tidy as the other, Alice thought to herself as she noticed several of the chessmen down on the hearth among the cinders. But in another moment, with a little of surprise, she was down on her hands and knees watching them. The chessmen were walking about, 2 and 2. Here are the Red King and the Red Queen, Alice said in a whisper of fear of frightening them. And there are the White King and the White Queen, sitting on the edge of the shovel. And here are 2 castles, walking arm in arm. I don't think they can hear me, she went on as she put her head down closer, and I'm sure they can't see me. I feel somehow as if I were invisible. Here, something began squeaking on the table behind Alice, and made her turn her head just in time to see one of the white pawns roll over and begin kicking. She watched it with great curiosity to see what would happen next. It's the voice of my child, the White Queen cried out as she rushed past the king so violently that she knocked him over among the cinders. My precious Lily, my imperial kitten. And she began scrambling wildly up the side of the fender. Imperial fiddlestick, said the king, rubbing his nose, which had been hurt by the fall. He had been right to be a little annoyed with the queen, for he was covered with ashes from head to foot. Alice was very anxious to be of use, and as the poor little Lily was nearly screaming herself into a fit, she hastily picked up the queen and set her by the table by the side of her noisy little daughter. The queen gasped and sat down. The rapid journey through the air had taken quite away her breath, and for a minute or two she could do nothing but hug little Lily in silence. As soon as she had recovered her breath a little, she called out to the White King, who was sitting sulkily among the ashes. Mind the volcano? What volcano? Said the king, looking up anxiously into the fire, as if he thought it was the most likely places to find one. Blew me up, panted the queen, who was still a little out of breath. Mind you, come up the regular way. Don't get blown up. Alice watched the White King as he slowly struggled from bar to bar, till at last she said, Why, you'll be hours and hours getting to the table at that rate. I'd far better help you, hadn't I? But the king took no notice of the question. It was quite clear that he could neither hear her nor see her. So Alice picked him up very gently and lifted him across more slowly than she had lifted the queen, that she mightn't take his breath away, but before she put him on the table, she thought she might as well dust him a little, so he was so covered with ashes. She said afterwards that she had never seen in all her life such a face as the king made when he found himself held in the air by an invisible hand, and being dusted, he was far too much astonished to cry out. But his eyes and his mouth went on getting larger and larger, and rounder, till her hands shook with laughing that she nearly let him drop on the floor. "Oh, please don't make such faces, my dear," she cried out, quite forgetting that the king couldn't hear her. "You make me laugh so that I can hardly hold you. And don't keep your mouth so wide open. All the ashes will get into it. There, now I think you're tidy enough," she added as she smoothed his hair and set him upon the table near the queen. The king immediately fell flat on his back and lay perfectly still, and Alice was a little alarmed at what she had done, and went round the room to see if she could find any water to throw over him. However, she could find nothing but a bottle of ink, and when she got back with it, she found he had recovered, and he and the queen were talking together in a frightened whisper so low that Alice could hardly hear what they said. The king was saying, "I assure you, my dear, I turned cold to the very end of my whiskers," to which the queen replied, "You haven't got any whiskers." "The horror of the moment," the king went on, "I shall never forget." "You will, though," the queen said, "if you don't make a memorandum of it." She's right. At least for me. Alice looked on with great interest as the king took an enormous memorandum book out of his pocket and began writing. A sudden thought struck her, and she took hold of the end of the pencil, which came some way over his shoulder, and began writing for him. The poor king looked puzzled and unhappy, and struggled with the pencil for some time without saying anything, but Alice was too strong for him, and at last he panted out, "My dear, I really must get a thinner pencil. I can't manage this one a bit. It writes all manners of things that I don't intend." "What manner of things?" said the queen, looking down over her book, in which Alice had put, "The White Knight is sliding down the poker. He balances very badly." "That is not a memorandum of your feelings."